starting in just a moment. Uh, 1 moment, please. All right, thank you for being patient, and we'll begin our digital marketing masterclass on successfully managing accounts inside Google's black box with Brad Geddes, the PPC Chair of Simplilearn. He is also a co-founder of AdAlysis and an author of several books, including Advanced Google AdWords. And I'm Stuart Creek. I'm a marketing manager here at Simplilearn. I'll be in the background helping Brad. And how to participate in the webinar, a couple of items about the WebEx controls. Please put your questions for Brad into the Q&A function, and we will gather those up and ask him the questions at the end of the webinar in the Q&A segment. You can put information in the chat box. If you do, make sure it goes to host and presenter. All panelists is better, because when you send it to all panelists, we will all see it. Otherwise, if it's host only, it goes to me and Brad won't see it. Again, questions asked in the chat box will be answered toward the end of the webinar in the Q&A. So it's best to put your questions in Q&A. And we are going to be doing several polls, one at the beginning and one at the end. So I'd like to begin with this one. And it's basically just to get a feel for who's in our audience today. And I'd like to ask how people are coping. We've been asking this for the duration of the pandemic. Things keep getting better and worse in cycles, so I'd like to get a gauge for your state of mind. And we'll keep the poll open for about another 15 seconds. And it'll close in 3, 2, 1. And see the poll results. And so we have an audience that's kind of most of the people are at two extremes, whether it's the more than 10 years experience or they're still in college. And the rest of you are kind of distributed in between. That'll help Brad gauge his presentation, and it's good to see that almost everybody is feeling well or doing okay. For those of you who are a little down, we hope that getting this information from an expert will help improve your mood today. So with that, I'm going to clear this and introduce Brad. As I mentioned, Brad is the PPC Chair, pay-per-click marketing chair at Simplilearn, co-founder of his own agency, AdAlysis, and actually an automatic ad testing platform. Author of Advanced Google AdWords, and he is a well-known writer, speaker, and commentator, as well as educator in Google Ads, account management, and pay-per-click advertising. So we're very pleased to have him here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and allow him to share his so that he can present to you. And welcome, Brad. Oh, you're on mute.
I don't have the ability to share yet. I think you need to make me something.
There you are.
All right. And let's share this screen just to confirm you can see everything.
Yes.
All right. And let me just move all the GoToMeeting stuff. There we go, over here, so I can see anything that I need to see. All right. Although the new control panel's a little iffy. All right, so anyway, everyone. So today we're gonna really sort of look at managing accounts in Google's Black Box. Right, for those of you who've been doing this 10+ years like myself, at one point in time, the world was manual. Everything you did, you calculated bids in Excel. You had to go manually crawl through everything. And more has been automated, but this doesn't mean you can't be successful. What it often means is we're sort of steering through the automation and making our decisions on sort of how we want things to go. So we can very much liken this to a lot of the self-driving cars these days, right? We hop in and we tell Google, where do we want to go? Kind of like our conversion story, right? What's our desired speed? Kind of like our bidding. How long should we stay on the road, right? Our budget. And we give it some parameters, right? Don't take toll roads, stay in this region. And we kind of sit back and see what happens. But that's a myopic, right? Your single view. Now, when we want a bigger look, we kind of want to know what's everyone else doing, right? Is everyone using the exact same technology? Then things seem really, really ordered, but they're not. And this is due to people. People are highly irrational. And computers, of course, are very rational. They're logical things, right? They get inputs, outputs, and they don't make contextual decisions about what they see. And so often we want to look at is how do we deal with the irrational humans, right, in the context of a logical marketing system. And this is where we've looked at this a couple of times, but it's always good for those who haven't seen this to walk through why we sort of make these statements, right? So this was a study done where a brand took monkeys that were the dominant monkey, the subordinate, and the prina, which is a sexy monkey. And they put pictures of the monkeys and brands next to 3 buckets of food. And the monkey walked up, they hit a button, they got food out. Now, as sort of expected, right, the monkey, the sexy monkey got the most people clicking on it, getting food, then the dominant, then the subordinate was by far the least. And after a while, they removed the monkeys and left the brand names up. The brands that were next to the sexy monkey got the most clicks still for food, the dominant second, the subordinate third. And even when we examine this to humans and how we behave in marketing, it's the same. Now, computers are the opposite. They would say, no, that subordinate monkey line is the shortest. Since the result is the exact same, I should take that pathway. And so the computer would go subordinate, dominant, prina in their choices, the opposite of a human, right? And this is where people can be illogical, and often humans have what we call prior knowledge, where we can make intuitive guesses to things. So this was, a video game, a 16-bit video game, so what we'd see back in the 80s. And with this video game, they gave it to humans and they gave it to machine learning systems. And they said, complete this level. Well, humans go, okay, I jump over this, I don't hit the monster, I climb down a ladder, and they won in about a minute. Part of this game, though, of what you don't see in the front end is that you don't get any feedback about how close you get to the ending until you finish it. Every single machine learning system except one failed to complete a level. And the one that finished took 37 hours of gameplay. Humans 1 minute. They changed the texture. All right, so humans now, boy, this was tougher for humans to figure out. This took about 5 minutes for humans to do. Again, games couldn't figure it out. Our machine learning couldn't figure it out. Then it was changed to every time you successfully got closer to the destination, you got a feedback loop, right? A positive input. Machines could figure it out very, very quickly and beat humans. Right? Early on, though, when there's a lack of knowledge and input, humans outperform machines. They use prior knowledge. When there's a lot of information, machines outperformed humans. That's often something you need to sort of bring to the table, is that prior experience you have about the world and how humans think. The other thing humans add is context to what the data looks like. So if I made this statement, if McDonald's has a really good year and more people eat hamburgers, then you realize more people will die by lightning. Or maybe it's reversed. More people die by lightning, therefore we go eat more hamburgers. Now this makes no sense, right? No sense at all. However, right, this is really correlated data over a 10-year period of time. And this is where humans add context to the data saying, no, that correlation doesn't matter. Ignore this data, or this does matter. Right? And this leads us to a quote I've used a few times, an important quote, that automation is really, really important, right? But excessive automation is often a mistake. I mean, even Tesla has pulled back some to say humans are underrated. So the question really becomes, right? If everyone's got the same tech, how do you stand out? What do you do, right? How do you go around everyone? And that's what we're going to talk about today, is getting around everything and sort of making your own pathway when everyone uses the same marketing stack. In this case, mostly, Google.
You can reshare your screen, Brad. I hit it.
Stop sharing?
Yeah, I hit a control that.
All right. There we go. It's shared.
Sorry about that.
No worries. No worries. Okay. So we're going to start with bidding, because this is usually when people think automation, they start bidding. So the number one thing is, what are you tracking? Right. So if you want to track in-store and chat and phone calls and your website, right, you need to make sure Google can read all that. That's step one, right? If you only give the machine half the data, it makes half as good a decision. Secondly, do you want to track everything, right? So if you give it the data and say, this is a goal, the machine's going to use it. We've seen e-commerce sites who add phone call tracking thinking, hey, let me take some phone orders, and see their conversions drop because the machine said, oh, hey, look, we can get you phone calls really cheap. And most of the phone calls are actually for things like returns and so forth. Hey, Stuart, you're not on mute, though, so we can also hear you, FYI. And so, right, this is why you want to make sure, right, that you're tracking things appropriate. So Google has changed conversion tracking a bit on the back end, where if you go into your conversions, right, you can say, I want to track this, but I don't want it used for automation. You've got a conversion column, use automated bidding, and all conversions are really for you. Then we need to make thoughts about, if you have a physical store, should we use in-store visits? It's a great metric. But what about driving directions? Is that really an intent we want to track? And so going through all the possible conversions in giving them either proper values or tracking or not tracking them is a really important part of making sure the machine has the right data. Are you B2B? and your tracking takes 6 months to happen. Well, you need to make proxies for conversions to have the machine work from. And so what we talk about often in paid search, right, is that we have all this data, everything's so transparent. And you find out it's a giant lie because every system has different business rules for tracking stuff. So we often talk about our source of truth, right? Our source of truth is the SEO department can't use one set of data, the PPC a different set, the social a different set, the email a different set, because we can all make our data look amazing. And if your CMO or whoever adds up all the leads you claim to drive, it's like 5 times more than the company actually made in revenue. So what you really want is to be consistently lied to, right? Where yes, we underreport 5%, but we consistently underreport 5%, or we consistently overreport 10%, whatever it is. In that way, your trending is better, and you're all using the same data set for machine learning, because while you think you're using it for paid search, the email team's using it to send emails and subject lines. Everyone's using AI to some extent here. Now, lastly, when we think about our conversion data, because with automated bidding, right, we're telling the system, here's our conversion data, do this, right? Either a CPA bid, a ROAS bid, whatnot. But what if someone clicks 3 times to convert, right? So if your last click, which is default, the first 2 clicks are completely ignored, which means over time they get bid to 0 because they're not converting, right? Lastly, if we say, oh no, give only all the credit to everyone who how they discovered us, which is first click, then you never close a deal. So thinking through your attribution model is not only for you to understand how people find us, how we divvy up credit when someone does multiple clicks. It's also about the machine bidding, right? Because you decide how you want to give the machine data to make its decisions. You've got data driven, meaning let the machine figure out what it thinks is the best for bidding for the most conversions for you. But if you don't have much data, it's actually linear, right? We have things like time decay, give more credit to the last click. But this is such an important decision to make, because if you're using automated bidding, you're telling the system, if someone clicks 4 times before they buy, this is how you divvy up the credit for those clicks, meaning this is the input the machine takes and when deciding how to bid. So attribution is important, and we've done webinars on attribution. But when you're giving your entire bidding to a black box, the way you track conversions and then divvy up conversions can make a huge difference. If you have 2 companies that are identical in every aspect, but one is using a position-based bid system and one uses a last click bid system, they will get completely different results over time. Right? And this is such an important decision, but it must be made. It's a very important one with automated bidding. So, bidding should be automated.
Brad, quick question. You use the terms CPA and ROAS. Could you just define those for the...
Oh, sure. CPA is cost per action or cost per conversion, but usually when we say CPC, we mean cost per click. So it's how much you pay for a conversion. And ROAS is return on ad spend. How much do you make based upon what you spend?
Thank you.
So bidding should be automated, right? But that doesn't mean you're always using Google's technology. So for instance, we have a company we work with who sells electric fireplaces. So a forecast of snow in the South, where it doesn't snow very often, increases conversion rates. We have another company, they do a lot of TV advertising, right? So conversion rates increase within 30 minutes of a TV commercial airing. Right, we'll all see other people, conversion rates decrease if a term is misspelled, common in medical industry. So when you see these insights in your data, one of your questions is, A, does Google take this into account for how they do bidding? Right, that's one question. 2, if you're doing automated bidding, it doesn't tell you this stuff. You don't pull the insights from this, which is why you often get into data science where you learn these insights. So these are true statements, but just because you're doing automated bidding doesn't mean you'll always use Google's, or you may divvy up Google's bidding. So for instance, this campaign sells electric fireplaces, this company. In the northeast of the United States, right, most people have fireplaces built in. They don't make many sales. So they don't have enough data to do return on ad spend bidding. So they do CPA bidding though. They split up the campaigns. They have campaigns in the South, right? They have most of their sales in the southern part of the United States. Therefore, they do return on ad spend bidding there. Then they keep the special campaign. It's going to snow in, insert city name, Dallas, Phoenix, whatnot, right? Cozy up to electric fireplace this weekend. And that's manual because it doesn't learn data. It's never consistently on. So here we're using Google's automated bidding, but based upon what we know of how people react, we're saying, Google, use your black box CPA here, your other black box ROAS here, and then we're going to manually handle these over here. So you can divvy up and mix and match, even the automated bid systems. Now, in this case, different company, they're a call center. They have about 100 call reps. For them, they consider it cheaper to pay for more clicks that do not convert than to pay the salary of someone who's not on the phone, right? And they know that if someone waits more than 5 seconds, 25% hang up, 30 seconds, 30% hang up, so not a big difference, but at a minute, right, 50% hang up. So they know in real time their average wait time, number of reps on a call, number of reps available to answer. Google doesn't know this. Right? So they have data Google doesn't have about bidding. So they don't want to use Google's automated bidding. In fact, they bid by a script, right? That just says, if 3 reps are open, there's no wait time, increase bid modifiers. If 1 to 3 reps are open, increase them a little bit. If no one's available, start decreasing bids. It's not super complicated, right? It's not nearly as complicated as Google's machine learning is. But because they're working with data in real time, Google will never have access to. They are better at bidding, even if it's a simple script. So there are times that you want to still use, quote, the manual bid settings, even though you're not manually bidding, you're just doing a different system to set the bids. So this is where we can mix and match these. So it's not an all or nothing proposition. Now, what's also important, and so a couple of years ago, right, if we had issues where conversion tracking was broken for a couple of days, we'd have to start from scratch, rebuilding up our data, right? So what's important is Google has launched exclusions where we can say, ignore this date range in our bidding, right, which is really good. Or we expect a change to conversion rates in this time frame, so anticipate that. Now, Google can't anticipate changes yet. They don't do a lot of year-over-year anticipation of changes. But this year, Valentine's Day, which was historically a day, everyone went to manual bidding because Google just couldn't keep up with the volume changes. This year, Google did pretty well. And so we're seeing the machine finally get enough data to manage some of the volatile days. Black Friday was one of their best managed. Now, a lot of people still go to manual on Black Friday because there's inventory considerations Google doesn't know. So those are some things to keep in mind with using black boxes for bid purposes. Now, things like audiences, though, give you more information, right? So with bid modifiers, Google ignores most bid modifiers with automated bidding. Audiences, though, this little adjust priority, right, is an important consideration. So if you have an audience and you're like, we know this audience converts better, right, than these other audiences, you can add the audience. You can give it a positive bid modifier. Now, Google won't use your actual bid modifier, but they realize you said this one's actually more important, so we're going to prioritize this in how we set bids, right? Or you could do negatives for that. So this is where you can start to give more signals to the machine. It doesn't use them in an absolute value of changing your bids around, but it is giving more input suggestions to the machine. And it's this type of stuff that you should keep your eye on of what Google's going to start using so that we can bring in more of our own data to help feed the machine stuff custom for us. And this has always been sort of the issue over time is Google would never, they don't make a bid system for you. They make a system for everyone. And then you have to find ways of how to customize your data, right? Audiences and the conversions you give it and your attribution are some of the best ways to do that. Now you can give the machine even additional signals, right? If you're lead gen, but you want to use return on ad spend bidding, you can give it even points and say, sales 1,000 points, it calls 250. It aggregates your data and then can even do some ROAS bidding off of different types of leads. So this is where if you were to just say, we're going to use cost per action bidding, Google doesn't differentiate a sale to a chat, right? They think it's the same thing. It's a lead in their mind. You gave it one conversion. But if you give it sort of points as sort of proxies for dollars, and then you use return on ad spend bidding, it does start to prioritize these. So again, we can make the system work for us. So there are people who are doing in-house bidding. And where you see this mostly is larger enterprise companies who have incredible data sets, right? And if you look for this in the end, they're doing predictive analytic modeling. So they're looking at historical data, their trend changes across all their audience information and predicting the changes to conversion rates so they can set appropriate bids based upon what people will be doing in the future. Right? Google can't do this for you because this is super, super custom. So there are companies though who do true quote manual bidding from Google side. It's not, it's automated with their own tech stack. This is the extreme. If you're a massive company, this is something to think about. If you don't have a couple $1 million literally to build a system, then you're going to get better results with Google, which is why a lot of people say, like, why does Google want you to use their automated bidding? You know, because auction control, if they can control the auction, they make more money. But in reality, they're better at bidding than just most of Google ad managers are. Bidding is a lot of math. And the other thing is opportunity cost. If you were to go back to how we managed bids, 15 years ago, and we would sit down with Excel spreadsheets, and we might spend an entire day just changing bids for the next week. Well, okay, at that point in time, you lost a day to changing a number that has a lifespan, a good lifespan of until the time you change the number again, right? Bid's only good until you change the bid again. So it's sort of like a lot of wasted time, where if you say, how do we do ad testing to consider how people are reacting these days with the state of the openness versus safety versus everything else? And let's do that ad test. That change is going to last you a much longer time. You'll get better results from that than just changing some bids around. And this is why, given the bid to the black box, a black box could be yours, right, is often a good idea if you're steering the machine properly. Now, beyond bidding, the next thing we really look at black box is keywords. And last webinar, if you haven't seen it, we really went through the match type changes. So the exact match, the phrase match, how to figure out moving modified broad to the old match type. So that's archived for you to watch, but we went through those in detail. Now we could truly automate, right, keywords. We could say dynamic search ads, we give Google parts of our website, we kind of write part of the ad, we sit back and do nothing. This is where user intent, Google has not fully figured out. You as a human are much better at deciphering intent than Google is. So while you could do things like this, it would automate everything, right? You could do DSAs plus CPA bidding and you're technically done. You wouldn't get good results because you're giving the computer almost too much leeway and where it doesn't know how to go in certain areas. So when we really think about keywords, right, we say, okay, we've got this term. And Google says, oh, thank you for this term. We think it means all this other stuff. And you're like, no, it means about this much stuff. So we think of the search term sound like the queen, right? It says, this is where you start from. But then we need to use audiences and negative keywords to say, this is really how far you can come back and forth. And as match types become looser and sort of intent-based, where your intent and Google's aren't necessarily the same thing, we get in this sort of world where we say, all right, here is an exact to a variant to a phrase, and these are the possibilities. And then we say, nope, Google, negative keywords, you can't touch this area. Nope, this is negative, we don't want this group. And this group isn't as good, so we'll do audiences negative modifiers. These are just priority, lowers, how Google will show that. Then we have positive modifiers and audiences telling Google, hey, these reach, and we can do demographics and so forth. And so we're essentially taking these search terms and we're giving Google the guardrails to say, this is how far you can go, Here's elasticity. You can stay in this range, but you can't wander further out. And this is a lot of how you work, where you're picking the keywords with a machine that wants to expand where it shows. So you are designing, sort of the road it can travel on and putting those guardrails in place. Because the problem we get into is the machine doesn't know how to pick intent. So if we've got multiple ad groups that can match the same search term, then what we'll often see is the machine says, hey, these two search terms both match. So I'm going to sort of show them both. And in this first example here, when it's shown from ad group 1, we have a 34% conversion rate. Ad group 2, 25%. On the bottom, we have ad group conversion rates range from 18 to 32%. Huge ranges. So this is, again, where the machine's just going to go back and forth, say, can I figure this out? You as a human says, I can see the pattern right here. Stop showing it here, show it from over here, And that's part of your job, is to audit the machine. So we went through n-grams quite a bit last week or last month too, but with n-grams, with the machine learning, Google expands your queries to what they deem as relevant. Google doesn't show you for as many queries these days. Doesn't show you doesn't show your search term data for all your queries these days. So you have less data to work with. Since you have less data to work with, you need to find new ways to examine this, And n-grams is a good one, where we can start to see what is the pattern across data. For instance, this is the search terms for the word keyword plus quote, And it's just a 2-word word. Now, that sounds exact match word. It's a keyword of the name quote. So how far could Google really match this to? Turns out we've seen more than 50 variations of 8-word search terms for a 3-word exact match term, But if you look at the data, would you really go read things that are 16 clicks, 7 clicks, 5 clicks, 11 clicks? It's so low, you don't feel you have enough to make decisions. Now, if we were to say, well, let's just do an n-gram. All right, so now we look at the patterns across queries, and then we aggregate the data. So now we can say, when someone searches with the word how, our cost per conversion is over $1,000. This account, by the way, is around 300, 350 CPA. So if someone asks a question, our CPA is 3 times higher than if they do not ask a question. There's enough data here. A machine should have figured this out. I mean, we're talking over $1 million spent, in 3 months on the word how. But Google hasn't programmed the machine to look for these patterns, so it's not using it. So this is where you, again, look at the data and say, okay, the machine missed this. We need to make this a negative keyword, And then you would say, oh, well, this is how. What about the other question words? And so the human is still very much needed to find the gaps in the machine. Machines are not omniscient, They don't see everything. So your job is to check for those gaps and fill them in and say, all right, machine, you messed up here, We need to plug these spots. So when we think about where to stand out from the automation, the number one place is ads. Ads are, when we look at a lot of accounts, and if there's a place that the majority of accounts don't do well, it's writing ads. Ads, you have to think through, what does someone want? What is this ad group trying to do? What is this page about? How do we combine these together? How do we make this unique from ad group 2? And they want a slightly different product or service. So a lot of people don't get ads right. And so they sort of turn to RSAs and say, hey, here's a bunch of responsive search ads, RSAs, where you give Google a lot of lines, and they say, we'll figure out how to make these ads work for you. And when that happens, we're relying on Google to understand user intent and how users behave. This gets us right back to earlier in the day of the sexy monkey and the eating beef causes lightning strikes and so forth. It doesn't understand humans. And so what we often see is that when you add a responsive search ad to an ad group, right, Google loves serving them. Google believes in responsive search ads. They often win by conversion per impression. Or sorry, they often win by CTR, click-through rate. They often lose by other metrics. And what we'll often see is Google serves them by far the most. Now, again, this is where you as a human say, our goal is conversions. And Google is by far showing, right, the most of our ad that gets the least amount of conversion. So we need to pause that or change the inputs, right? Because the machines inherently favor RSAs. You need to, again, watch that to put guardrails. Now, part of the reason the way they're designed. So when we look at what combinations of features and benefits result in the best conversion per impression, the best results, it's usually mixing and matching calls to action, what do you want someone to do, with benefits, what does it do for them? When you give a machine a bunch of ad lines, it doesn't know, right, that this is a benefit, this is a feature, and this is how we persuade a user. It just has to do all these combinations to try to figure it out. You inherently know the difference, which is why if there's a place that humans often, and I mean really often, and probably most of the time beat machines, it's in creating good ads. It's the writing part. Humans are much more creative than machine is. And so when you think of how do we stand out when everyone uses the same tech, it's often really in that ad part. I mean, this is last year when we first had lockdowns and things got bad, right? This company, schools closed, lockdowns were announced, they paused their account like many people. They brought their old ads back. They didn't do too well. Competitors enabled ads, and that helped a little bit because there's more people saying the same thing. And then they went, oh, what do people really want these days? To know how to stay safe and what we're doing to keep our employees safe. Boom, they changed ads based upon that simple statement. And they're a like 25, 30, no, 35-year-old company. Their absolute best year ever was last year, right? Because they learned how to talk to customers and listen to customers. So while this is as old, those of you who are in college, right, this is something beaten into you. Customers always right, listen to customers. It's true, but often in digital marketing, you've got you here, and then you've got a wall of various fulfillment and things, and then customers. And you often don't hear direct to the customers, right? And this is often where you may want to talk to the salespeople, or if you're a physical company, go on ride-alongs, whatever it is, right? To learn what the customers really want. Because marketing hasn't changed, right? It's persuading a user to take action. Claude Hopkins wrote a book 90 years ago on scientific advertising. A lot of it's still relevant today. And so getting your insights from ads is really important. So this is where we often even turn to multi-ad group testing, where we're aggregating data across ad groups. If this is a new concept to you, we've also done webinars on this. It's in the Simplilearn archive, right? We're essentially saying, we have this question. Does keyword insertion affect my data, right? Which is this very bottom test here. So we've got, over 5,000 ad groups where we don't have keyword insertion, and 4,000 with keyword insertion, just aggregating data, right, to understand the difference. And this is where you as a human can learn those good insight stuff, from subject lines for email to buttons, so forth, right? So when we think about tests we've seen lately, we do a lot of tests, right? We've seen large brands finding better conversion rates, not including brand for non-brand keywords, which is pretty common. We've also seen a large brand finding better conversion rates, including brand for non-brand keywords. I put these two first, right? They found the exact opposites. One of them's in travel. They're a big travel aggregator company, and people they don't care what your name is. They want good deals on travel. The other one's an insurance company. There's a lot of brand knowledge in insurance, right? So they find the exact different things. So often when you hear someone say, yeah, always do this or always do that, you should hear like, this is something we should test to see how it affects our data, because we may be different. We may be the exception. And as a human, right, marketing, advertising, and connecting with other humans is something you are way better equipped to do than the machine is, right? And so when we think about this, all this automation going on, handing the bidding to the computer with the proper inputs, right, useful. Making sure the computer's showing you for the right things, right, your keywords, the intent is important, and you're gonna leverage both. Well, you might use responsive search ads, and it's fine to use them and test them, right? That's always great to test. In the end, though, what that communicates to a user, right, is that last connection point of what makes paid search powerful, right? Paid search is someone saying, I want X. I go to Google and say, I want X. And your job is to say, I have X. I'm really good at X. You can find lots of great information about X here. Come to our site and buy X or learn about X, right? That's your job, right? And so that's where that human really comes in. And we've seen now uplifting and positive messages are often being the we're here for you and the unprecedented times. Those are failing right now. And the safety and what you did to keep employees safe are still doing well. They're trending a little bit down. We will see with Delta another month if those trend back up again. This is what we're actually watching really closely, is the uplifting and positive messages versus the safety messages and where everyone sits. These are iffy right now, as sort of things have been a little crazy the past month. Humor and colorful are really doing well because people have been locked up in a way. And yes, some of you have gotten out luckily and seen stuff, but that humor and colorful is doing well, as we've seen so much gray. Seeing any little, yellow and orange and something else is really pulling people out. And that freedom and sort of escape to people is starting to do well and doing exceptionally well in certain regions. And this is why the ad part, these are humanistic trends. The machines don't get this at all, right? And this is really, if I haven't stressed this enough, where the humans really, really live. So we think about the future, right? Number one, when we say attribution, we're often talking in channel these days, meaning what happens if you click a Google ad, a Facebook ad, an Amazon ad, and then you just search organically and buy, right? So in Google's attribution, you only had one click because it sort of doesn't see all these other things. So a cross-channel attribution system is what we eventually have to go to. But this is the other problem, is everyone's got their own machine learning. So this is an actual client's data, right? Where their email machine says send emails Tuesday afternoon. Their TV says these channels at 9, except when football games are on because they sponsor several football stadiums, right? So then you should do stuff on Saturday afternoon. But Google says the conversions are best for you on weekdays from 3 to 5. And then, of course, their DSP is optimizing on images that aren't in their TV ads or their Google Discovery ads. So every system is giving them different data. And this is where the human still right now has to say, hold on, let's make sure that someone who is seeing our TV ad and searching is actually seeing the benefits from our TV commercial, right? And that's still, this is the role of humans, because there's not any really cross-channel machine learning stuff going on. This is your business intelligence is very important in this. We think of what makes black boxes useful, right? We've got centralized data, which some of you probably have. We have coordinated data, which some people have. Pulling insights and attribution from that. Some people have it, but it's pretty low. Predicting what's going to happen based upon our current data sets. This is where the truly cutting edge companies are living. It's tough going right now. This is still pretty new territory, but that's where we will be, is using centralized data and year over year and other data sources, right, bringing it in to predict user experience. That it's a tough world still there. That's the real cutting edge. Not many people there stuff. For most companies, working on a centralized data hub with coordinating data across systems is a great place to start. It's not done in a lot of places still. Because in reality, look at this, right? It's all data, right? I mean, the self-driving car goes out, it gets inputs everywhere. Some of it doesn't matter. Do you think your self-driving car cares about the wind speed on the top of the trees when that's 40 feet above where it sits? No, doesn't matter. It's data. Doesn't make a difference to you, right? Won't affect you in any way, right? So some of this data does matter. That yield sign, that's very important data. Those pedestrians that you're about to hit, very important data, right? The fact that there's someone waiting over here doesn't matter at all. So often we have to look at, right, is this is the data we need to focus on and learn from and make our decisions on. This is the noise, right? That sometimes we have to tell Google, ignore the noise, right? Ignore these keywords, ignore this stuff. They don't matter. This is where you focus, we can get there. And so as Google's black box, we'll expand to more regions, right? Your job is to make sure it has the data to work with, right? It's working with the conversions you want, the attribution you want. You're pulling data from that, right? That's your step one. Two, you give it guardrails on the targeting, be it keywords, audiences, whatnot, right? And say, this is the type of user we want. Google's going to keep expanding how they do the targeting. So you need to keep saying, okay, this is extra noise, ignore it, right? This is where you get to roam as you're going. And then finally, when it comes to the message, right? Why does someone want to do business with you? This is where you truly shine and can make the big difference in how you look at stuff. And so that's, as we look at Google's black box, those are sort of the three areas in where you need to really be focused versus you can give the machine some leeway. All right, and with that, I'm going to stop for a moment and see what kinds of questions and everything we have for so far today. So, Stuart, hopefully we have some good questions, thoughts, etc. from today's session.
We certainly do. A first basic question, definitional, from Girish in the YouTube Live audience. What is the black box? What's the definition of Google's black box?
You know what? So black box is really a term that's been used, gosh, since 50, 60 years to say something that makes decisions with you not knowing why it makes decisions. It's sort of a jargon term that's been around for, I don't know, 100 years. I don't even know where it comes from. The etymology of black box?
There was a novel called Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon that referred to a black box. I think that may be the first reference to it.
Yeah, but it's just sort of a very nebulous term that's existed for years of something that is making decisions that you aren't privy to why it makes decisions, and it affects you in the end.
Right. In Google's case, that would be, why is it deciding what bids to make and that type of thing?
Yep.
Okay. We have question that relates to broad match modifier. Nikki asks whether the changes to broad match modifier are going to be addressed in the Simplilearn Digital Marketing Masters course.
Oh, great question. I hope so. I have not heard from the program managers yet, so I hope so. But the webinar we did last month covered everything you need to know about the modified broad match changes. We went through it in depth, changes, how to make them, etc.
Yeah, I dropped the link to that into the Q&A, and I will drop it also into the chat so that people can go. Unfortunately, we didn't record that on YouTube Live, so the link is to a LinkedIn Live recording that is a little bit lower quality, but it does have all of Brad's information from that webinar. So that's in the chat now. Durba asks, how can waiting time be synced with Google Ads scripts? Does this happen within 24 hours?
How can waiting time? So in their case, their phone system, right, has wait times aggregated in it, and so they're just using their phone system, their IVR, their phone system data to look at waiting times, and then their computer just pulls it out and then aggregates it and uses it for Google data changes. Google doesn't know your wait times, right? So this is something you need to pull from your phone data systems. If you're using one of the more complex systems, then you probably have it somewhere. It's just a matter of aggregating it together.
Okay. Alan asks, for in-house bidding, do you need to use an API?
Technically, no. You can use scripts as well. So we see some companies who are keeping information in scripts, and they have they'll have, like, a webhook in their e-commerce system that is pushing out to a script in Google Docs, which then runs updates data in Google Docs, and then a script that runs in Google Ads is pulling data from Google Docs to change their bids and stuff based upon their webhook stuff. So you need to coordinate data to some extent. And some people run a simple script that just says, based upon conversion rates over the past 90 days, how should my bids be changed, and use a very simple CTR divided by CPA formula. So you don't have to you could use scripts API for in-house bidding, or you could do it there are other ways to do it as well.
Okay. We have a couple of definitional questions. And I know that the last webinar you did address this one. What's an n-gram?
So you know what? Is my screen still up, Stuart?
No, but I can let you share again.
Can you share my screen real quick?
Yeah.
Let me share my screen real quick. All right. So these search terms, right? So when we look at this search term, we have how, and the term how is in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 queries. We have the term how much. The term how much is in 1, 2, 3, 4 queries. All right, 5, 6 queries, right? And so what we're doing, n-gram does is it's looking at commonalities of words across search queries. Then it's aggregating data by each of these. Now, if you're a statistician, by the way, technically an n-gram is 1, a bigram is 2 combinations, a trigram is 3. We're marketers, we sort of don't always use all the perfect statistician data. And so the n-gram is trying to do is say, when the word how is anywhere in these queries, then what is my aggregate data to make decisions and pull insights? So that's really what the n-gram, bigram, trigram type of data is doing. Okay, you can have the screen again.
All right. And then we have a couple of standard terms. If you could just define RSA, ETA, CTR, that type of thing.
Sure. So RSA is responsive search ads. So these are the ad formats that you give Google between 3 and 8 headlines. You give Google 2 to 6 descriptions or something. It combines them back and forth as they show ads to the user. So you don't know what the user is going to see. ETA stands for expanded text ad, which is now the standard text ad format, where you create 3 headlines and 2 descriptions, and then you know exactly what the user is going to see. CTR is click-through rate, which is the ratio of how often someone sees your ad versus clicks on your ad.
And then Yashi asked if you could go back and clarify the difference between CPA and ROAS strategies.
Yeah, so CPA is cost per acquisition. And so you give Google a set of conversion data. Now, conversions, anything you want to define. It could be a lead, a website visit, someone calling you, whatnot. And so you put the leads into Google, and then you tell Google, right, I want to pay X for a lead. I want to pay $25 or $40. And then Google's going to say, all right, I'm going to set bids for you, trying to get to be your $40 conversion for any conversions you're using. And from a lead generation standpoint, that sounds pretty good, right? Like if someone fills out a form, we want to pay $200 based upon our close rates. But when you think of a variable checkout amount, e-commerce, right? One checkout could be $10, the next could be $2,000, right? So in this case, you wouldn't want to pay the same amount, right? You don't want to pay the same for a $10 checkout as a $2,000 checkout. So ROAS is return on ad spend, often referred to as a ratio, like 100% meaning you're breaking even, and 200% you're doubling what you put in as investment. And so return on ad spend takes into account how much you spent and the revenue, right, that it got back, and therefore is looking at bidding based upon how much money your money is making as opposed to a straight cost per a lead.
Okay. We have a couple of questions about what university graduates could expect. Do you have an insight into what a fresher graduate might expect to earn just out of the box?
That is so country dependent, and it's region dependent, right? I would say in the United States, a college grad, based on where they go and blah, 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 often 35 at the very low end to 50,000. But then seeing someone within 2 to 3 years at the 80,000 to 90,000 level is not uncommon in the United States.
Okay. And the other question is, what would the best strategy be for a fresher graduate to pursue further education in digital marketing? The question is literally, what is best for fresher graduates to start an offline or online course in India?
What is the best place to start an online or offline course in India?
Yeah, for somebody who's just graduated.
So if you've just graduated college, right, and you want refresh, so that you've got college classes where you're taking like Simplilearn, right? I mean, they're in college classes, and you have the working knowledge of what's happening right now, right? Essentially. Then if you want more, you could take, a Google Ad cert or a Bing Ad cert, but you really could go get a job. You have people who go to traditional colleges and they get a marketing degree, but that degree does not get into how platforms work and the nuances of managing stuff. In that case, like a Simplilearn course is, of course, a great place to be before getting the job and getting the OMCP certification, which is becoming more recognized. So this is going to sort of depend. Did you get a traditional degree that is not include what happens today versus you have one, what's going on today?
Yeah. Ciala asks a technical question, which is, when a new ad group's created and some of the keyword status showed non-eligible low search volume, will that status change over time?
Yes.
Okay.
So low search volume means there's generally under 30 to 35 impressions per month for the exact match of that term. A low search volume term can actually get impressions because it matches some broad thing. It's probably not a lot. If that term suddenly starts getting a lot more impressions, the low search volume will disappear.
Okay. And Simala also asks, if a search term triggers the same or similar keywords in more than one ad group, does Google decide for you which is the best ad to show?
Yes, which this is where when you have a keyword that is, you've got ad group A and ad group B, and the same search term can trigger either ad, right? Google now has ad serving control. This is often where you want to say, no, I want ad group A to actually serve, So you add a negative keyword to ad group B to force Google to show the correct one. Otherwise, they'll just sort of go back and forth in how they show them.
Okay. I see that we've reached the end of our hour, and that's all the time we have for questions. We have a few other questions in the chat and Q&A, but unfortunately, we don't have time to get to them this time. I apologize to our attendees for that. But I want to thank you, Brad, for this really excellent webinar. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can complete presentation. And we'll do that starting with a poll. And this poll is for the audience to ask, what digital marketing skills are you most interested in learning? We've been talking today about PPC marketing and keyword and ad strategies, and there's a number of other disciplines within digital marketing. And then when are you planning to start that journey? And I certainly hope we included the second question, but I don't know if we did.
Yeah, I don't see it in the poll, Stuart. It's not on my screen, FYI.
All right. In the interest of time, we'll skip over that one, but here is result. And SEO is probably the most popular answer, but it goes across the board.
It's a pretty even distribution. A lot of people interested in multiple disciplines, which is great.
Right. And what I'll mention is that, and I've dropped it into the chat and the Q&A windows, we are offering discounts for today's attendees. So for attending this webinar, you will be able to get a 20% off discount on our postgraduate program in digital marketing, which is in partnership with Purdue University. And you will also be able to get a 30% off discount if you choose to do the digital marketing master's programs. We have 2 levels, associate and then the higher level specialist. You will receive an email after today's webinar, probably tomorrow, that includes links to these programs and the discount codes. So don't worry if you missed the link in the chat. However, you can go to Simplilearn's website and look at the course pages. I will mention what the Purdue University postgraduate program in digital marketing looks like. We co-created it with Facebook. It contains content from Harvard Business Publishing. It's a 6-month program that requires between 5 and 10 hours a week of investment of time, and it gets you a Purdue certification in digital marketing, as well as membership in the Alumni Association, a capstone project at the end of the program that you can use as a practical example for your portfolio, master classes from Purdue, from Facebook, and it covers a whole series of courses in a integrated curriculum. So I will conclude with that, and I want to say thank you again to Brad for this excellent webinar. Builds on the past one, and I've dropped the link to that past one a couple of times in the chat and Q&A, so you can kind of go back and view that one, and you'll receive a recording link for this one in your email tomorrow. So thank you, Brad. This is your LinkedIn information so people can follow up with you.
Yep. All right, well, thank you for hosting us, Stuart, and thank you everyone for attending today.
Wonderful. And we have our next webinar next week, Wednesday, a general career webinar on job hunting strategies for tech jobs with the head of human resources from ToneTag, Vinay Trivedi. So we'll include a link to that in the follow-up email for this webinar. And that concludes our webinar for today. So thank you all so much for being here. And thank you, Brad. And we hope to see you next week and at other future Simply Learn webinars.